Caitlyn got nerfed. Does that mean that bottom players get to play the game again? What's going on, summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides high elo tier list. Like always, we're here to cover the most recent patches, balance changes, and also provide our tier lists adjusted for our high elo players. To summarize this series, we take into account data from Platinum and higher, as well as the insight of our own in-house analyst to provide tier lists that'll assist you in your climbs. This time around, we'll be covering patch 10.19, the patch Worlds will be played on, so stay tuned to find out which champions are the best in every role. Before we start the video though, I want you guys to know that we have a lot of resources for you to improve over on ProGuides.com. There are courses, coaches, and live classes there aimed at helping you improve bit by bit. But we even offer VOD reviews that'll help you save time and know exactly what you need to work on, so feel free to check it out. For our question of the day, what makes a champion fun for you? Personally, for me, it's when a champion challenges me to improve in some sort of way, be it mechanics or find out how to abuse their strengths. I enjoy playing any champion when I feel just the right amount of pressure. Let me know your answers in the comments below, and with that said, let's jump into the video. Beginning with top lane, we had one balance change, and that was to Aurelia. Our damage was increased from 125 to 325, all the way up to 125 to 375. While this was a buff, Aurelia's statistics haven't moved. Her win rate has remained about the same, and thus we've decided to keep her in the A tier for now. While this was the only balance change, we've gone ahead and made a lot of small shifts on the tier list itself. First off, we've gone ahead and added Lulu onto our list. Although she's rather unpopular in Western regions, Lulu is seeing some play in Korean solo queue. She sports some incredible statistics, such as a 53% win rate last patch, and we've decided to place her in the A tier. She's a niche pick that not many players will really want to lock in, but it's clear that she can put out solid results. We've also moved up both Malphite and Set into A tier as well. Malphite is beginning to emerge as a reliable hard carry. While he is a tank, he's an excellent answer to the meta that's developed, which seems to focus primarily on physical damage. Set has also managed to bounce back as players have begun to adjust to his changes from last patch. Finally, we've moved Yasuo, Aatrox, Garen, Tryndamere, and Gangplank down to the B tier, while also moving Akali up into it. This is definitely an exhaustive list of changes, but let's talk about why we made them. In the case of Yasuo, we've decided that he's got too many difficult matchups in the top lane specifically. While he's capable of succeeding, and we've definitely all seen Yasuo players pop off and dominate, the harsh reality is that in most cases, he won't in the top lane, because winning those 1v1s can be a tad too difficult. Aatrox, Garen, and Tryndamere were moved down simply because they were on the cusp of A and B tier anyway. Definitely still on that border, but our analysts think they perform at around the same level as the other B tier picks and felt the need to make adjustments to the tier list. In the case of Gangplank, it simply feels a little too difficult for him to scale up right now. While his range and ability to remove crowd control make him a lot safer than we'd believe, it feels like too big of an investment. You give up a lot of early game pressure, and as a result, things can go wrong pretty quickly. A good example of a champion like this is Kassadin in the mid lane. However, a champion like Kassadin feels much more rewarding when we feel like Gangplank doesn't feel as impactful as someone like the Cass. Finally, Akali has been moved up to B tier because she's been doing better in the top lane as well. We saw her play rates surge following a buff, and the effects have bled over into the top lane too. This was a hefty set of changes, but it simply felt like this list had to be cleaned up, so we've gone ahead and done that for you guys. The top lane hasn't changed significantly in this single patch, but instead we felt like these changes reflect a general shift over the course of several patches that we can much more easily see as time has passed. To conclude the top lane section, let's run you guys through our OP and S tier lists. Although we want to keep the OP tier as exclusive as possible, we've decided to move Camille into the OP tier as well. This has been a pretty difficult decision to make as we need to limit the number of champions that we include here. However, there's a lot of anecdotal as well as concrete evidence that she belongs here. While she just passes as a solid pick in high elo, she's an incredible one in elite brackets of play. Camille is the most contested top laner in Diamond 2 and higher, and she sports the highest play rate, a 22% ban rate, and just below a 52% win rate. Camille's flexibility, incredible mobility, and high damage output merit her as one of the best solo queue carry champions because she's a solid pick in the early game, mid game, and even scales to the late. Thus, our OP tier list is comprised of Darius, Fiora, and Camille, followed by Shen, Wukong, Jax, Maokai, Hecarim, and Urgot in the S tier. That's it for the top lane. Let's run through the jungle next. Kicking off the jungle changes, let's talk about Ivern and Udyr, two of League's more underpicked junglers. First, let's talk about Ivern. His E's slow was increased from 40 to 60% up to 50 to 70% this patch. His win rate has increased quite substantially this patch, but we do think that the A tier is befitting of him. The increased slow makes aggressive play, as well as peeling, much more effective. But Ivern remains a situational pick that can be either very strong or very lackluster. Given the right team comp, Ivern is a pick that can outperform many other junglers with his great utility. However, not all comps need him or mesh well with him. Udyr received a buff this patch as well. His Phoenix stance cone damage has been increased from 50 to 275 plus 60% AP to 60 to 310 plus 70% AP. Ironically, Udyr's win rates went down this patch in spite of this buff. It's pretty early on in the patch, and there's potential for him to climb back up, but we don't think he's a very reliable pick in high elo at this moment. His kit feels a little too underwhelming right now, and it's difficult to justify playing him when you could get so much more out of other picks. We'll also keep him where he's at in the C tier. There have been two shifts we've made to the list, however. First off, Wukong has been moved down to the A tier, as he's seen a lot less play and the hype around him has died. Players have had plenty of time to learn how to play against him, and several nerfs have left him as a pick not nearly as OP as before. We've also moved Shen up to the C tier, as we recently saw him find success in professional games, namely the NALCS Finals. TSM has shown us the power of this pick, and we've come to see that he's got a lot of potential. However, the vast majority of players aren't finding much success on him just quite yet, so we'll hold off on placing him any higher. We moved him to the C tier because he doesn't feel like the best pick most times, but he can clearly find success if given the right circumstances. Our OP picks in the jungle are once again Evelynn and Graves, followed up by Karthus, Kha'Zix, Nunu, Kayn, Rek'Sai, Elise, Fiddlesticks, and Hecarim in the S tier. That's it for the jungle. Let's hop into the mid lane next. In the mid lane, the first balance changes we want to go over is a nerf to Azir. His competitive track record has merited another nerf, and thus his W's passive attack speed bonus has been reduced to 15 to 55%. For the vast majority of players, this is the salt thrown at an open wound, as we see him sitting around a 46% win rate in Platinum and higher. We moved him down to the C tier because, like the rest of the picks there, he's a champion that can succeed and perform at a very high level. However, it's difficult, and you'll find more consistent results with other champions who don't feel as volatile. Twisted Fate was also nerfed this patch, losing 5 movement speed, bringing his base down from 335 to 330. Twisted Fate has also been finding a lot of success in competitive play, but hasn't been doing as well in solo queue. This 5 movement speed was actually a huge nerf to Twisted Fate, but because of his immense map pressure, we still think he deserves a spot in the B tier and plan to keep him there. Next, Akali got nerfed as well. Damage buff on her Q was reduced from 35 to 135 to 30 to 130. Also, her Q's AP ratio was reduced from 65% to 60%. Some of her buffs from previous patches have been reverted, and we've gone ahead and moved her back to B tier in response. Ahri also had some balance changes reverted, leading to a buff this patch. Her W's cooldown was reduced from 10 to 6 seconds to 9 to 5 seconds, while the mana cost was reduced from 55 to 40. Since we only do these high elo tier lists once a patch, we actually didn't have a chance to move her down previously, and thus she's actually still where she belongs, in the A tier. Finally, Sylas got buffed as well. His ultimate's cooldown was reduced from 100 to 60 seconds to 100 to 40 seconds. This buff was a huge one, but as of late, we still haven't seen any major changes to Sylas's win rate. This is probably because these buffs don't kick in until the mid to late game. Unfortunately, games are often already decided by the time Sylas hits level 16. Perhaps in a slower meta game, this buff would have had a much bigger effect, because like we said, this was definitely a big buff. However, at the moment, it's clear that Sylas's power level hasn't shifted very much, thus he'll stay in the B tier. Wrapping up the mid lane, we've got Yone and Zed in the OP tier, followed by Talon, Diana, Vladimir, Fizz, Katarina, Karthus, Galio, and Kassadin in the S tier. We do want to note that Yone is likely going to fall out of the OP tier very soon. A lot of his power came from the novelty of him being a newer pick. Many players struggle to play against him because they didn't really understand what he did. However, with every patch, we have a better understanding of how to play against him and which champions do well versus him. Another pick in question is Kassadin. While his early game is clearly weak, the reward for surviving and hitting the mid game without bleeding out too much is simply way too rewarding. Of all the scaling champions, he's definitely up there in terms of the risk to reward ratio because of his mobility and ridiculously high damage output. That's it for the mid game. Let's head into the bot lane next. We've got a ton of bot lane changes, so let's get into it. The first one was to Caitlyn. Caitlyn's base AD was reduced from 64 to 62, and her attack speed per level reduced from 4 to 3.5. Finally, after all this time, this is the nerf we've all been waiting for. Caitlyn's win rates have dropped significantly, but she retains an incredible amount of presence in higher ELOs. We moved her down to the S tier as a result of this nerf. While her win rate is actually below 50% by a bit, she still retains a very high play rate as well as over a 40% ban rate. Senna was also nerfed this patch. The missed wraith drop rate on minions she kills has been reduced from 8.33% to 4.166 repeating. That's 4 and a 6%, everybody. However, this nerf has not been enough to stop her altogether. She's still seen a decent amount of play and still provides an immense amount of utility for her team. Senna doesn't scale as quickly anymore, but she still sports a very high range and provides value no other marksman can to her team. Lucian is next for nerfs. His AD per level was reduced from 2.75 to 2.3. Lucian did make his comeback in the bottom lane. These nerfs might hurt that a bit. Oh wait, now I remember. He also made his comeback into the mid lane. Oh, and the top lane as well. Well, that's just how it be for him, and Riot decided to hit his scaling this patch. They want his early game to be his clearly defined power window, and now players face some more consequences for letting games drag out. We will keep him in the A tier for now, however. Next are buffs starting with Sivir. The movement speed bonus on her passive has been increased from 30 to 50 up to 35 to 55. This buff actually increased Sivir's win rate by more than 0.5% this patch. We didn't expect her to get that much out of it as it wasn't a flat movement speed buff. But at the end of the day, 5 movement speed, even if situational, is a pretty big deal for marksmen. With more mobility, it's easier for Sivir to kite or even chase enemies. Given her lower range compared to other marksmen, movement speed is even more important for Sivir, and we've gone ahead and bumped her up to the B tier as a result. Vayne got a juicy buff on her ultimate this patch. At all ranks, it provides 10 more AD than previous patches, meaning it now provides 25 to 65 bonus AD when cast. 10 more AD is obviously going to make any marksman feel much stronger, and her win rate has gone up by almost a whole % in Platinum and higher. She's even doing pretty well in elite brackets of play now, but the meta still doesn't suit her too well. We'll keep her in the A tier for now, but a couple nerfs here and there for other champions can definitely bump her up into the S tier. Well, we all need to see Aphelios at Worlds, so Riot went ahead and buffed him too. Aphelios' AD per level was increased from 2 to 2.4. While it's still looking pretty grim for him in solo queue, we've all seen Aphelios pop off. He feels absolutely disgusting to play against, and he's a pick that we want to keep in the S tier in spite of very poor statistics. Unfortunately, this is going to be a you're gonna have to trust us on this one kind of moment. Aphelios retains an extremely high competitive presence in spite of his poor performance in solo queue. He's a very powerful pick in the right hands, but is definitely a volatile marksman. Aphelios' mobility is rather low, especially without his Severin, and piloting him can prove to be rather difficult at times. However, he's a very unique marksman because of the arsenal of weapons he has to choose from and is capable of a lot in any given circumstance. To wrap things up, our bottom lane S tier consists of Caitlyn, Senna, Draven, Aphelios, Ashe, the Lux and Sona duo, and Miss Fortune. Finally, let's conclude the video with our support list. Like we've been saying in other videos, there weren't any support balances changed this patch. However, our analysts have decided to make some slight shifts to the list. Zyra and Swain have been moved into the A tier. After some thought, our analysts have concluded that these are two champions that are the ones you want to look to when you need more damage in your team composition. In cases where your team unfortunately locks in all AD, you'll want to have one of these two picks handy just in case. Even without many items, both of these champions deal a very high amount of magic damage, but also do a great job at fulfilling their roles as supports. They both have solid crowd control. Swain is a bit tankier and can follow up any teammates with his passive, while Zyra does a very good job of stalling out fights. While they're both sitting close to 50% win rates, our analysts believe that picking these two champions under the right circumstances is definitely justifiable, as they can sometimes outperform even S tier picks. Of course, these games will always be situational, so we'll still run you through our S tier picks, as they're solid or at least decent picks in nearly every game. Our S tier picks for this patch still consists of Senna, Lulu, Thresh, Leona, Blitzcrank, Janna, Bard, Morgana, and Pantheon. Alright, thank you all so much for watching. That concludes our high elo tier list for patch 10.19. Like always, I want to encourage you to subscribe so you will receive notifications for any informative content we upload, but also so that we can better connect with you. One more time though, make sure to also check out ProGuides.com for a ton of resources to help you improve. Until next time, Best of luck on Summoner's Rift.